It is a pleasure to be here at this symposium and also an honor to be a participant. I suspect that most of you are like me, wondering about the feedback, that once you get over the initial wonder of Grand Canyon, although there's wonders to come after that, take a few hikes, you get drawn into the history of the place. And I am like that. I've been fascinated by those that were here before us, even if I'm starting to fall in that category myself. In fact, the date on my name tag is 1977. I was first here when I was visiting my sister who was going to school at NAU, and she wanted to come up and apply for a second summer's job with Fred Harvey. So I brought her up here and I got to see the canyon for the first time. Well, on March 31st, 1902, Francois Mathis, and that's him in the photo, arrived at the South Rim to begin survey work that would result in the first detailed maps of Grand Canyon, the Bright Angel and Vishnu quadrangles, which are also shown here on this slide. That work would consume him for most of the next 2 years. His story is worthy of its own presentation, perhaps at the next symposium, although I might have to arm wrestle Mr. Upchurch, who's over there, I think, for that particular honor. He and his men built triangulation stations, traversed trails and roads, and placed benchmarks. Much of Mathis's time was spent painstakingly mapping with a plane table. Okay. So a plane table, like illustrated in one of these photos that were taken during his time here. I've also read through Mathis's field notes from the time and included here the inside cover of his 1904 journal. He was 29 years old at the time. He notes his weight, his height, and even his hat size, 6 3/8. Now, I don't know how many people know their hat size today. I just think I'm sort of M, and that's about where it goes. He seemed quite personable, quite often chatting with visitors about his work. His journal is full of names of notable Grand Canyon figures that make you wish you would have been a fly on his shoulder. Hance, Bass, Cameron, Buglin, Barry, and even the author George Wharton James, the photographer Henry Peabody, and if I'm reading him correctly in his journal, Thomas Moran. And also Louis Boucher, shown here at one of their triangulation stations. Mathis paid Boucher $7 for his help in getting supplies across the canyon to the North Rim via the Bass Trails. Here's how they crossed the river, shown in this particular photo. This is crossing at the Bright Angel, not at the South Bass. At the bottom of the South Bass Trail, Mathis would write about how he had to loosely tie the horses to their boat and then push the horses into the river. Without incident, I might add, so that was at least a pleasant conclusion to that. And most of the inner canyon work was done by his assistants, Stewart and Baldwin. I presume this is a photo of one of them, although I'm not sure. If they kept journals, I would sure like to take a look at those, which reminds me of Tom Martin's comment about rabbit holes, because that would probably be a really big one. The first map to be published was the Bright Angel Quad in 1906. Quite stunning and really a beautiful piece of art. The transformation of the canyon onto this two-dimensional surface is really nothing short of breathtaking. One reason for this is almost certainly due to Mathis's convincing his superiors at the USGS to allow him to draw this map with 50-foot contours instead of the 100-foot contours originally planned. What especially piques my interest is that there are trails marked on this map, trails that were suitable for travel by pack animals. Of course, none of the newer trails are here. No South Kaibab, no North Kaibab, no River Trail, no Clear Creek Trail. But other trails are shown here that have since faded from use and memory. When I first saw this map, I kept saying to myself, I've been over that trail, and I have pictures of them. So that brings me to the heart of my presentation today on old maps and forgotten trails in Grand Canyon. These areas here that I've circled are the village on the South Rim and what would later be the Grand Canyon Lodge on the North Rim, just to orient ourselves. There are 4 of these old trails on the South Rim that are in and around the Bright Angel Trail, which on the map is called the Cameron Trail. And there is a 5th trail up on the North rim in Bright Angel Canyon. So let's take a look at some of these details here. This is in a large portion of the area in and around Indian Garden. And there are three old trails here. The first one I'm calling the Wash Henry Trail. It's usually referred to as the Old Miners Trail today, but Mathis actually uses this name in his journal for this trail. While he was working out the logistics of going to the North Rim, he went down this trail and checked out the river crossing. But because he had no information on how to get up and out of Bright Angel Canyon, he opted to use the Bass Trails instead. This trail goes to from the Tonto level to the river and is still in pretty good shape. At the river level, you can find this in the first ravine west of the Silver Bridge, and at the Tonto level, there's a large cairn marking this trail. The second one I'm calling the Bright Angel Wash Trail. It's part of the original Cameron Trail. In Wayne Tomasi's book, he mentions that old-timers use this name for this little side canyon, and I think it works well as a name for this little trail segment. This branches off the Tonto Trail east of Indian Garden. It's still in really good shape until you meet up with the current trail. The old telephone poles are still up through here, which makes it easy to find. Once it crosses the current trail, it descends steeply to the bed of Pipe Creek over the original Devil's Corkscrew. And then the third trail here is the precursor to the Plateau Point Trail, so I've called it the West Plateau Point Trail, not especially original name. It is difficult to follow as there's a lot of cactus growing out here over this part of the plateau, but the hiking is real easy, so it's no problem finding your way out to the rim where there are 4 large rock cairns. And I have a few pictures here just to illustrate some of these. That's me at the large rock cairn marking the Wash Henry Trail. Today the Tonto Trail is up the slope much higher, and despite the size of this cairn, you'd be hard-pressed to be able to spot it from that trail. I took this picture of my hiking buddy, Bill Ferris, on a well-defined segment of this trail, and if you look closely, you can see the river and actually the Black Bridge off there behind him. The Bright Angel Wash Trail has some well-preserved segments, not only with rock edges, but the occasional water bar still in place. And here are some of the old telephone poles that, again, can easily direct you onto the trail. Once down below the Tapeats, the old trail stays on the west side of the wash. There is an old trail on the west side of the wash that passes by some nice Indian ruins. From this trail, I took this photo looking back at the main trail, which is on the east side, and you can see again how well defined that trail is through that particular wash. Here are the 4 large rock cairns out at the edge of the Tonto on the West Plateau Point Trail, and a picture of a USGS marker that is near to these particular cairns. Here's a view of these same cairns looking back up towards the south rim. The 4th old trail on the south side of the river goes down Horn Creek a bit and then follows along the base of the Tapeats for quite a ways before descending to the river. I first tried this route in the 1980s based on the scant directions in Harvey Butchert's book. I got down to the river, but atop a 20-foot cliff and wasn't able to reach the water. Once I had this map, I realized that what I needed to do was go much farther west in order to reach the river. Interestingly, I think this is the same problem that George Wharton James had, which he wrote about in his famous book, In and Around the Grand Canyon, published in 1900. He and a companion were told that they could use a boat tied up at the river in the second canyon west of Indian Garden. As I read his story, they went down Horn. The route is in the west arm of Horn, and so is technically in the second canyon. They kept getting cliffed out, so they backtracked to the Tonto, and they continued west to what most believed to be Salt Creek, and that turned into a quite miserable experience for them. Oops, sorry about that. I can go back. I can go back. I can go back. I can't go back. Okay. That's all right. When you think about it, it's a kind of an odd place for a trail that just goes down to the river. But I have this impression that it probably was part of a cross-canyon route. Harvey Butchert had written about a couple of routes he was able to go up from 91 Mile to the plateau to the Tonto on the north side. And it's real easy to cross the river there between the bottom of this trail and 91 Mile. I was able to go down last year with a hiking buddy of mine, John Eastwood. And I took this multiple image picture of him along the first switchback as you come off of the Tonto. And that's the best part of the trail. So if you're looking for anything better further down, don't bother, because it doesn't really get that much better. We were able to follow bits and pieces of a discernible trail down Horn to where you wrap around to the west. But then after that, we really didn't see anything. We ended up not getting down to the river on the trail as shown on the map, but we were able to find a route down to the river anyway. In fact, here's our next photo. This is the objective. This is the little beach at the bottom of that trail, and across the river is 91 Mile. In fact, if you've seen the skeleton on the book cover of Tom Meyer's book, he's back there somewhere, that was found here in this particular ravine, so I think pretty close to this trail. Now John and I were there, and we looked at this and we thought, well, we can get down to the river, but we absolutely positively have to turn around at 12:30 in order to make sure we got back to camp before it got too dark to use our headlamps. And so we made it to the river at 1:15. And that's because once you start for the river, you really just can't stop and turn around. So we got down there, and it was a very nice day. And in fact, we got back to the camp before we had to use our headlamps. One last trail on the Bright Angel Quad is the Old Bright Angel Trail. It's only shown from the rim down to a bit above the creek. When Mathis was in this area doing his mapping, he met two men that came out of the canyon on a crude trail. He really did not want to go back on the Bass trails, and so he checked it out, and he found out that there was a decent enough route down through the cliffs. Of course, he already knew about the trail on the other side of the river, the Wash Henry Trail, so he was quite elated to be able to go back up via the Bright Angel Canyon, or go back to the South Rim via the Bright Angel Canyon. This old trail would become part of the Kaibab Trail, of course, before it was rerouted up Roaring Springs Canyon. Consequently, it shows signs of some pretty serious construction. Hikers still use this trail. The Park Service does have this sign posted on the rim at the trailhead. Here's a part of the trail that's still in pretty good shape. As you can imagine, though, it does get overgrown quite easily. Here's a section lower down that shows some significant construction to shore up the trail as well. At the bottom, I found crossing the creek to be a bit of a challenge, but once you're on the east side, you can follow a well-worn path down to the bridge that's just below the Manzanita rest area. The other map is the Vishnu Quadrangle. This was published a year after the Bright Angel map, and it's got some abandoned trails that are pretty much all around Horseshoe Mesa. There's Desert View, of course, before any of the current developments. And here is the 6 trails and trail segments around Horseshoe Mesa, and then there's 2 more that are on the rim that, of course, are abandoned today. Here's a close-up look of Horseshoe Mesa. And so what I have here first is the Sockdolliger Overlook Trail. All these names, of course, I made up myself. It is a walk down through the Tapeats into a shallow bay on the east side of the plateau, wraps around to a dead end. But from here, you can follow a very steep and rocky ravine that'll take you down to the river at the foot of Sockdolliger Rapids. And if you look closely, you'll see that it looks like this is maybe an extension of the trail that comes off the prong of Horseshoe Mesa down to the Tonto. And so I'm thinking maybe this was like the fastest way to get to the river from Horseshoe Mesa for those that were interested in doing that, and maybe that was its original purpose. The next little trail segment I call the Inner Gorge Overlook Trail, goes to a real nice spot on the rim with real fantastic views of the river. The third one is a spur trail to O'Neill Spring. The fourth one I've given the name of Cottonwood Spring Trail, not that that's very exciting because there isn't really much there to distinguish it from just the social trailing that goes on in the area. The fifth one is a trail I haven't been on in Lower Cottonwood that goes down through the Tapeats and to the bed. The sixth one is the old Grandview Trail to the river. It leaves from the Tonto Trail as you hike from Cottonwood to Grapevine and then descends to the river rather rapidly. I went down in 1984, and I wasn't sure I was really in the right place, but then I went down again in 2006, and it was the same place, so I guess it was the right place. Here's a couple of pictures for Sockdolager. There's a big cairn there. The Tonto Trail is quite a ways away, so you're not likely to be able to see that from the trail. There's what the trail looks like under the Tapeats, easy to walk on until you reach that dead end. Here's the Inner Gorge Overlook Trail. There's a couple of nice cairns there you can spot pretty easily, but there's no cactus really, so you can walk out to the end pretty easily there too. This would be the O'Neill Spring Trail. When you come down the main trail below the red wall, this heads off to the south. In June of 2000, I went down with my hiking buddy, John Eastwood. We got to the first ridge, and then we were totally lost among all the wild burro trails. But we actually ended up finding the spring, and not only finding the spring, but it was full of water. And I've never met anybody or heard of anybody talking about water in that particular spring. I've been there many times since and haven't seen a drop, so I don't know if it was something unusual about that particular year. I have been able to follow the whole trail and carry it. I led a group down here last August. They call themselves the Grand Canyon Morons, and many are in the room today. And even despite that, I'll note that we're all sitting in the shade of the single solitary tree that's here, so we're not that much of morons. Here's the cairn that marks the old Grandview down to the river, and the best part of the trail is really through the Tapeats. It's well defined with some rock outlines and even some steps that are present. In 2006, I had my buddy John take this picture of me down at the river to match up with an old book from Burton Holmes, 1901, and so perfect match, even though some of the foreground doesn't look all that close. Finally, there are a couple of rim trails here. The seventh one I'm calling the Old Grandview Trailhead, which leaves from the rim about halfway back from the viewpoint to the current highway. And then number 8, the Grandview Hance Rim Trail, Grandview Hotel, the Hance Ranch Rim Trail. I haven't been on any of that. I don't know if any of that still survives today. I wouldn't be surprised if some parts do, but kind of interesting in terms of how you could look for that. So here are a couple of pictures from the old Grandview Trailhead. It's not really in very good shape. There are still signs of trail construction, like these old metal stakes. And yes, the trail does follow along that narrow ledge between the Tapeats and the Coconino. It doesn't feel that bad when you're walking on it, but when you look back, you think, well, this is a good picture to show to everybody. So modern hiking the Grand Canyon really requires access to good maps, and these were the very first ones that were available to us. We have Francois Mathis to thank for them, although I should mention that Richard Evans does get shared credit on the Vishnu map, and then he later went on to publish the Shanumu map. In 1948, iconic cowboy actor Roy Rogers, probably didn't think you'd hear his name here, starred in a movie called Grand Canyon Trail. So I thought it would be fitting to finish with his famous line, "Happy trails to you until we meet again." Thank you.